65% of ordinary people will electrocute a stranger to death if someone in a lab coat tells them to. Not criminals. Not people with a history of violence. Regular volunteers who responded to a newspaper ad in New Haven, Connecticut in 1961, and almost none of them knew what they were capable of. Until they sat down in that chair. This is the Milgram Experiment. And it didn't just change psychology. It changed what we think it means to be a good person. And then here's what most people assume about themselves. That they'd resist. That if someone in authority asked them to do something clearly wrong, they'd push back. Say no. Walk out. Before the experiment, when researchers asked people how they thought participants would behave, almost everyone said the same thing. Only sadists and sociopaths would go all the way. Psychiatrists estimated maybe 1% of the people would deliver the highest shock. Normal people? Never. They were completely wrong. Stanley Milgram was 28 years old and working at Yale University when he designed this. He'd been thinking about the Nuremberg trials, about how ordinary German soldiers explained their role in mass atrocities with 3 words. I was following the orders. Milgram wanted to know if that was a German thing, a cultural thing, or just a human thing. In 1961, the same year Adolf Eichmann was on trial in Jerusalem for coordinating the logistics of the Holocaust, Milgram started recruiting. Volunteers came in from newspaper ads. They were told the study was about learning and memory. They were paid $4.50 just for showing up. Each volunteer was introduced to another person, who they assumed was also a volunteer, but was actually a paid actor. The real participant was always assigned the roles of teacher. The actor became the learner. The learner was taken to an adjacent room and strapped into a chair. The teacher sat in front of a large machine, 30 switches starting at 15 volts, climbing in steps all the way to 450. The highest switches weren't labeled with a number, just 2 words, X, X, X. Every time the learner got a memory question wrong, the teacher was instructed to deliver a shock, increasing by 15 volts each time. The shocks weren't real, but the teacher didn't know that. At 75 volts, the learner grunted. At 120, he shouted that the shocks were becoming painful. At 150, he demanded to be let out. At 270, there was an agonized scream. At 300, he stopped answering entirely. At 315, a violent scream. Then silence. And every time a teacher hesitated, every time they turned to the experimenter and said, I don't think I should keep going, the experimenter responded with one of 4 scripted phrases. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice but to continue. No threats, no consequences, just a calm voice in a lab coat. 65% of participants went all the way to 450 volts. Take a moment with that number. These weren't people who wanted to hurt anyone. Many of them were visibly distressed, sweating, shaking, asking the experimenter to go check on the learner. One participant had a full seizure from the stress. Others laughed, not because they found it funny, but because they had no other outlet for what they were feeling. And still they continued. Milgram had a name for the psychological state that made this possible. He called it the agentic state. It's what happens when a person stops seeing themselves as the author of their own actions and starts experiencing themselves as an instrument of someone else's will. The moral weight transfers. You're not doing it. You're following instructions. The responsibility belongs to whoever gave the order. We don't decide to enter the agentic state. It happens automatically. Something shifts the moment a legitimate authority figure gives a calm, confident instruction. Milgram ran 19 variations. When the experimenter gave instructions over the phone instead of in person, obedience dropped to 20%. When the teacher had to physically press the learner's hand onto a shock plate, close enough to feel them flinch, obedience still held at 30%. Here's the one that matters most. When the teacher was joined by 2 other participants who refused to continue mid-experiment, obedience collapsed. Only 10% went to maximum voltage. One person saying no, out loud, changed everything. There's a second case that lands differently. Philip Zimbardo at Stanford in 1971. He randomly assigned students to be either prisoners or guards in a simulated prison. The guards weren't instructed to be cruel. Nobody told them to. They invented it themselves. Within days, they were forcing prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands, running humiliating drills at 2 a.m., and placing people in solitary confinement for minor infractions. Zimbardo shut it down after 6 days. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks. Different mechanism, same conclusion. Ordinary people given a role, a structure, and an implied permission will do things they would never do as themselves. What does this mean for you personally? It means the question isn't whether you're a good person. It's what situation you're inside. Milgram's work showed that context overpowers character. Not always, but far more often than we want to admit. The people in that room weren't monsters. They were people who had convinced themselves that someone else held the responsibility. And the distance between that room and what happened in Germany and Rwanda at Abu Ghraib is thinner than any of us are comfortable believing. The one protection Milgram actually found, witnessing someone else refuse. A single person saying, "I won't do this," gave everyone else permission to stop. That's not a small thing. Subscribe. Every video we make ends up somewhere uncomfortable. That's the point.